Hey guys, what's going on? Steven back again, and I'm back with another 40k video from Warhammer. And the topic for today's video is every Necron faction explained. Necrons. The next army at the time that I was going to play. I remember I was reading the codex, learning their rules, they had some pretty good ones at the time, and just as I was about to start buying models and building my army, Games Workshop was like, hey, your store makes a lot of money and is always very busy, so we're closing you. And that was the end of that. So Necrons, sadly, were not meant to be, since back then there was not that many places to buy and play 40k. You know, the only place was a Games Workshop store. So yeah, once that store closed down, that was pretty much the end of it. You know, there was nowhere else to go. So I guess it just wasn't meant to be. So anyways, now I know I have done a similar video before, except it was by the Template Institute. Another really good video. I remember once I finished watching that video, I did some more research on the Necrons, and I noticed they did forget at least one character and a dynasty, which actually sounds pretty badass. Hopefully it gets covered in this video. But the character is called Zun Bakir. Hopefully I said that right. Zun Bakir, known as the Mother of Oblivion, is a female Necron overlord and Pharaoh of the Maynarch dynasty, violent and malicious to the extreme like all of her subjects. She nonetheless was able to give her violent dynasty a purpose and mission after the Great Sleep so that it could maintain its discipline, the systematic extermination of all life. Let's see, it says, before the War in Heaven, the Maynarch held a sinister reputation among the Necron tier dynasties, known for their savagery and malice. The Silent King deliberately conditioned them to have their malignancy and ruthlessness deepened during their transformation into mechanical Necrons. That sounds so cool. And I'm kind of surprised that the Template Institute did not cover that. They didn't cover that, which is kind of a shame, because, I mean, that sounds awesome. A character called the Mother of Oblivion? Can you just imagine what a model like that would look like? I don't know, would that be like some sort of like hulking brute type figure, or would it be like a regular Necron overlord type character? I don't know. But I mean, that sounds badass. The Mother of Oblivion? That sounds cool. That sounds so cool. Hopefully he goes over it in this video. So we'll have to see. All right. So anyways, let's get on to the video and check it out. Here we go.
The Necrons of Warhammer 40k are by far one of the most beloved and feared factions in the entirety of the grimdark future. And
Rightfully
it's easy
so.
to understand why. They're immortal androids that have existed in our galaxy longer than perhaps any other species. They all went to sleep
Fair
60
point.
million years ago and woke back up to find their planets infested with the verminous filth of what they consider to be lesser life forms. Now these spooky undead robots harness some of the most mysterious and powerful weapons of destruction ever documented by mankind. And these guys won't rest.
It's kind of interesting that they've been asleep for that long,
from the surface of their world.
and they're
But
still
the Necrons don't
so
exist as a singular
technologically
collective.
advanced
There are a lot
as
of
compared to
different
like
Necron
Eldar and
dynasties,
Tau.
each with their own unique culture, history, and ways of conducting war. From the relentless and implacable crusading forces of the mighty Sawtek dynasty that seek not only to conquer the worlds of lesser species, but also all those of the other Necron dynasties as well. Everything is fair game according to the Sawtek. There's also the dynasty of the Novakith, which is infamous for its history of blood rituals and relentlessly savage melee combatants that get
That's
stronger
kinda
and
cool.
faster the more foes they slaughter. Then there's the
Really?
Nephrit dynasty that is actually looked down upon by many of the other Necron dynasties as being too ruthless in their conquests. Their perspective
Really?
is, why waste time fighting up close and personal when you can absolutely obliterate your foe with an overwhelming onslaught of sheer ballistic destruction? Or, just explode their sun. Whatever works. We're going to be talking about all
That's
that and a
kinda
whole
cool.
lot more, and by the end of this video, you're going to know everything you need to know about all of the Necron dynasties. But first, a quick shout out to this video's sponsor, and then we're going to dive headfirst into the Grimdark. Listen, I know it's something that us fellas don't really think about too often, but taking care of your skin is actually super important. Especially if you're like me and you work a job
But yeah,
that's
that's
got you
kinda
working
cool that they
super
could go
late
to sleep for
hours,
that
looking
long
tired all the time,
and
waking
still
up with
be
bags
so
under the eyes, the whole
technologically
thing.
advanced as
It's
compared
a
to, like,
super not flattering
Eldar
look. Well,
and
thankfully,
Tau, which
Geology
are
reached out to partner with me
pretty
to bring you this
advanced
sponsored video,
technologically.
and they hooked me up with a line of some of their amazing skincare products that are each made only with ingredients that have been
I
trusted
wonder
by
which
dermatologists
race
for
is
years,
the most
instead of a bunch of
technologically
fancy
advanced. Is it still
nonsense
Necrons?
that sounds really cool but doesn't
Or is it like
actually do
Eldar?
anything. If this is
'Cause,
the
I mean,
first time
Eldar's
you're
got,
hearing
like,
about them, Geology is a 22-time
everything-
award-winning skin, hair, and body
everything
care company
done for them.
recognized in Men's
You
Health,
know?
Oprah Daily, Hypebeast, Beardy,
know.
Esquire, and Ask Men. And listen, I know how to maintain a beard, but as far as what I'm doing with my skin, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm kind of clueless. But thankfully, Geology takes care of all of that for you and makes the whole process super easy. All you have to do is click on the link in the description of this video, take a 30-second diagnostic quiz, and with a few clicks, tell them about your skin and goals. Their team of dermatologists will design a personalized routine just for you that is shipped directly to your door. It's really that simple. Right now, for a limited time, Geology is gonna hook up my viewers with an absolutely insane offer. Use my code HAMMER70 or scan the QR code on the screen, and they'll give you an exclusive
all the models
70%
he's
off
got
their
behind him.
award-winning skincare trial set. On top of that, you can save big on add-on products of your choice when you add it to your trial. This is one of the best offers that you're going to see, so get it before it's gone. That's Geology,
I like the Magnus model back there.
Geologie.com. Big thanks to Geology for partnering with me to sponsor this video. The Sautek dynasty is by far the largest and most powerful dynasty that currently exists in the 42nd millennium.
Okay.
Now, this is in no small part due to the relentlessly aggressive expansion efforts of its pharaoh, Imhotep the Stormlord, who maintains a
okay,
join
so
us
this is
or
like the
die
main
perspective when it comes to Necron
dynasty
diplomacy.
faction.
The dynasty's crown world is known as Mandragora the Golden, and it is said to be the physical embodiment of the spirit of the Sautek. It is a dire and grim world, macabre in its magnificence, and fortified to such a ridiculous degree that the idea that anyone would even conceive of mounting an invasion against it is an impossible and somewhat hilarious jest. Not only is
Really?
Mandragora the center of the Sautek's military power, but it is from here that the dynasty orchestrates its galactic conquest. It's important to remember that their crown world is not the only world they control, as they have over 80 different tomb worlds, as well as hundreds of other planets that were originally controlled by lesser
80?
species and they have
Wow.
subsequently conquered. They've managed to conquer this much in only a couple of centuries, and this probably wouldn't have been possible if it hadn't been for Imhotep the Stormlord, who seized control for himself when the first Sautek Necrons began to wake up. And if you want to know more about this awesome character, I actually did an entire deep dive specifically on him and his history,
The
so
one
you
they
should definitely
all
check that
fear.
out after you watch this video.
I'll
I'll
have
throw
to
a
check
link in the
that video
description
out.
and I'll have it posted at the
curious
end of the
now.
video as well. For the Sautek dynasty, enough is never enough. They're constantly seeking to raise more fleets, amass more armies, and conquer even more planets. The Great Stormlord will not rest until all of the Necron dynasties are unified under his banners, and the verminous filth that have come to inhabit the galaxy since the days of the War in Heaven are utterly and entirely
But what about the
eradicated.
Silent King?
No matter what dynasty they come from, Necron nobility is not immune to entering bouts of petty squabbling and never-ending political wars, much like humans of the Imperium. They are a proud, egotistical, and arrogant species, and most often believe their dynasty's specific culture and way of life is superior to all others. That being said, all-out war between the dynasties in order to conquer their territory is relatively rare, but that's not the case with the Sautek. They do not limit their conquest to only worlds inhabited by lesser species, as everything that finds itself in the path of its war fleets is fair game. And due to their immense power and numbers, practically all of the other dynasties either outright fear the Stormlord's armies, or at least respect him as a hunter might respect an ecosystem's apex predator. When the Sautek
So this
come
is
across
basically
another
like the
dynasty-controlled
main-
world, its pharaoh
the
has
main
a choice
faction,
to make.
if you will.
Either bend the knee and replace the banners with those of the Stormlords, or be broken down piece by piece and assimilated by force. Imhotep is a generous pharaoh, and to those who show subservience, he rewards greatly. To all those who oppose him, however, he is utterly ruthless. When you try to directly compare the Sautek Empire to the entirety of the Imperium of Man, Their 80 such tomb worlds and a bunch of random planets they've conquered is pretty small by comparison, but considering they only woke back up a few centuries ago and have already managed to gain that much territory, it's logical to think that their military strength is expanding exponentially the more territory they manage to conquer. If they're not stopped within a few more centuries or even millennia, they could end up becoming an apocalyptic level threat. Over the last couple of decades, within Warhammer's lore, the Sawtek were always seen as the biggest, baddest, and strongest of all the Necron dynasties. But that's recently begun to change with the coming of the Silent King, as he has a dynasty of his own known as the Saracen dynasty. And although this event hasn't come to pass yet, it's inevitable that the Stormlord and the Silent King will soon find themselves in direct conflict with one another. When we talk about this dynasty in particular, it's important to know that it didn't always used to bear the Silent King's name, as the Silent King is not the first of his kind. There had been many Silent Kings that came before him. However, what the dynasty's original name was has been lost to time, as all of that knowledge was erased when Zarek initiated his command protocols that gave him control over all of the Necrons after biotransference. When the War in Heaven came to a close, Zarek would tell all of the Necrons to go to sleep, and after this occurred, he severed those command protocols. When they all woke back up, the Necrons once again found themselves in control of their own bodies. All of the different Necrons have mixed feelings on Zarek. Some hate him and some still worship him. Considering that the Zarakan dynasty is the one that the current Silent King came from, all of the Necrons within it believe themselves to be the most superior of their kind. Many of the other dynasties, on the other hand, are not entirely convinced, the Stormlord of the Sawtek dynasty potentially being the most notable. The major thing that you have to understand about the state of the Necrons is that as an overall faction within the 42nd millennium, the vast majority of them have been asleep for over 60 million years, and a lot can happen during such a long period of time. Some dynasties were completely wiped out while they slept, whether due to vengeful Eldari raiders, new species that arose on the planet's surface and subsequently ended up wiping themselves and the planet out, or they may have been victims of a freak geological or astral phenomenon that ended up tearing the world apart. Although rare, some dynasties did emerge from the Great Sleep relatively unscathed, while others like the Zarakan dynasty suffered untold devastation without being completely pushed to extinction. Even worse still, when many of the other Necrons began to wake up, many of them ended up blaming the Silent King and thus his dynasty for the horrors they had faced during the War in Heaven, and the subsequent downfall of their entire species due to the deals he made with the Catan. Many of them would end up taking vengeance on the sleeping Zarakan, inflicting even further devastation on the wounded dynasty. Despite all of this, the nobles of the dynasty remained confident in their own superiority, and believed with an almost fanatical devotion that the Silent King would indeed one day return and reward their loyalty. Some Necrons believed this to be nothing more than wishful thinking, while others secretly feared the possibility that their prophecies may eventually come to pass. Here's the thing about that superiority complex of theirs. It may actually be true. For one, there's this neutral faction known as the Triarch Praetorians that work throughout all of the other dynasties, but ultimately it's said that they only truly answered to the Silent King himself, and only offered their services when whatever the dynasty is trying to do would ultimately align with the Silent King's goals. They would frequently throw their support behind the Necrons of the Zarakan dynasty in particular, and would even assist them when going to war against other dynasties. On top of this, their cryptechs are somehow able to create weapons, armor, and war engines more powerful than those of even the strongest dynasties. And finally, their tomb worlds and repair facilities seem to operate with greater finesse and efficiency than any others. The strangest part of all of this is that even the lesser dynasties that would end up joining them would soon start displaying these same remarkable abilities. On one hand, we can assume that the Zarakan dynasty has access to knowledge that the others do not. But the lore tells us that this is not exactly the case, and something almost supernatural is manifesting amongst themselves and their allies. There's some kind of buried techno-wisdom deep within a Necron subconscious that is only unlocked when they pledge themselves fully to the Silent King. This may be a final promise by the man himself to the people he ruled over, that no matter what happened to them, they would always endure. Their beliefs would eventually be vindicated, as the Silent King did in fact return in the 41st millennium. With the prophesied day having finally come to pass, the Zarakan dynasty stands atop a vast hoard of ancient treasures, super weapons of inconceivable destructive ability, and indomitable armies ready to march out and reclaim the galaxy for the Necron people. Many dynasties have either been absorbed by the Zarakan or have willingly allied themselves with the supreme ruler of all Necrons. All those who resist automatically declare themselves as opposed to his will. And in such troubling days, there are many Necron nobles who would willingly surrender their power to feel the unity and validation of a tyrant's hand on their shoulder once again. The Stormlord, however, the Sawtek dynasty, views the Silent King as a traitor, an individual that was responsible for their species' downfall and the apotheosis into their undying wraith-like forms. He has sworn to stand against the Silent King and his dynasty, and eventually, a cataclysmic event will come to pass when both of these titanic forces end up bumping into each other. Whereas the Sautek have the greatest numbers amongst all of the dynasties, and the Zarkhan by far have the greatest influence, the Nihilic dynasty, on the other hand, has perhaps something far more valuable than both of these things combined.
Really?
Money. And lots of it. As will be a common theme with a lot of the different Necron dynasties, the awakening of the Nihilic dynasty proved to be pretty difficult, as they found themselves in a hostile galaxy with considerably diminished resources compared to when they originally went to sleep. The surviving nobility decided that for the good of the dynasty and the increased chance of survival, they would consolidate all of their strength on a single planet, the crown world of Geddon, which ended up proving to be the right move. Even during the Days of Flesh, the Nihilic were said to be tremendously rich, holding vast resources of wealth and priceless treasure vaults, making them one of the most powerful political influences within the courts of the Necron tier. This remains true even in the 42nd millennium, as when they moved all of their forces to Geddon, they also funneled all of that wealth into the planet's hyperspatial vaults. These gaudy Necrons now funnel their tremendous cache of resources into legions of war engines and raise ever more mighty defenses, while equipping their warriors with the finest Necron weaponry imaginable. When the lesser races sought to challenge them, they hurled army after army against their newly fortified borders, and each and every time, they ended up being repelled with devastating casualties. No matter what dynasty they come from, Necron nobles tend to be pretty arrogant and petty, but for the aristocracy of the Nihilic dynasty, this is pushed into a completely different strata. Every perceived slight, whether real or imaginary by lesser species, would be answered with utter annihilation. Out of all of the Nihilic's great and terrible treasures, perhaps their most valuable is the preserved head of a Yith Seer. This ancient relic allows the Necrons that use it to peer into the schemes of the future to determine outcomes that would be most beneficial to the dynasty. With this remarkably powerful prescient ability, the Nihilic would always strike precisely where and when they needed to in order to crush any interlopers. Whereas in the early days of the dynasty's reawakening, they focused entirely on defense and creating an impenetrable bastion from which to garner strength, they have begun to utilize the Yith Seer's head to instead go on the offense, marching out to conquer new territories before reinforcing them with Noctilith pylons before advancing out again. This strategy has led them to have less overall territory than many of the other dynasties, but every single planet they control is ridiculously powerful and well equipped in its own right. In recent years, the dynasty has pledged its allegiance and full support to the Silent King, and seeks nothing short of complete galactic dominance for its people. Although the previous dynasties we've talked about here are definitely involved in a lot of political squabbling, the next dynasty we're going to talk about has gone the exact opposite direction, one in which many individuals within the Necron courts would define as complete and utter insanity. Even during the times of Flesh, before biotransference, the Novak dynasty stood apart from the others and was infamous for its sheer barbaric brutality. They practiced long and elaborate blood rituals, and their armies were said to be utterly horrifying to face in battle. Even now, within the 42nd millennium, old habits tend to die hard, and the Necrons of the Novak are perhaps the purest form of Necron terror made manifest. The galaxy is no stranger to horrifying armies that drench themselves in blood and methodically butcher their way across the killing fields. But it's one thing to see sentient creatures made of flesh doing this, and an entirely different thing when it's done by glass-eyed androids that conduct their butchery with not only the skill of the galaxy's most esteemed surgeons, but a cold, logic-driven mathematical approach to murder that is completely alien and seemingly impossible to comprehend. It's as if war to them is less a battle for honor and territory, and more like a hyper-advanced industry of slaughter. They offer no quarter and no mercy for their victims, hacking all that stand before them apart like lunatic butchers set loose in a pen of livestock. Their brutality only ceasing when their armies are completely drenched in gore and their foes are left as nothing more than dismembered meat. Most Necrons that exist in the 42nd millennium have a very fragmentary memory of the Days of Flesh and the rich history of their dynasty's unique cultures and traditions. This is true of the Novak as well. The memory of the blood rituals still linger in the deepest recesses of their personality engrams, although the purpose for which these rituals were conducted in the first place has now been lost. Now in battle, when the enemy's blood begins to flow, those engrams trigger and they provide the soldiers with a surge of vigor and aggression that is said to be almost narcotic. Every enemy they cut down, every severed limb that flies overhead, and every foe they burst apart into a cloud of red mist, further pushes them deeper and deeper into their frenzy. The nobility of the dynasty takes full advantage of this particular mental state, fielding vast infantry-based armies full of blade-wielding Lich-Guard and other melee-based units equipped with monomolecular weaponry and trans-dimensional swords that owe their impossible sharpness to the fact that the blades themselves vibrate across dimensions. In addition to these troops, the Novak are infamous for employing more Necrons that have fallen to the Destroyer curse than any other dynasty. Many other Necrons believe this to be an incredibly reckless course of action, as the Destroyers are nearly impossible to control and are utterly obsessed with the eradication of organic life. Their armies alone are a terrifying sight, but once that bloodlust begins to come online and the butchery truly begins, the might of the dynasty is fully revealed in a gory, blood-drenched brilliance. Their armies marching out across the stars to slaughter greenskins and human alike, with no sign of slowing down, until every system is drenched in blood. If the Novak dynasty is famed for its brutal and relentless melee combat strategies, then the Mefrit exist on the exact opposite end of the spectrum and harness the full might of the Necron's superior technology into weapons that can bring about the death of multiple worlds with each and every shot. There was a time when civilizations across the galaxy rightfully feared the Mefrit dynasty, as it existed as an infamous example of destructive excess. In this time before the Great Sleep, they were the planetary headsmen of all of the Silent Kings. They employed incredible star-killing weaponry that was capable of exterminating entire systems whenever somebody was needed to be made an example of, or an incredibly stubborn opponent shattered. It was the Mefrit dynasty that was unleashed to execute the deed. Their weaponry was said to be of incalculable power, stuff that the Necrons of today, although having some of the most powerful and advanced weaponry ever documented by mankind, made these engines of destructions look like children's toys by comparison. The Mefrit would mercilessly detonate the stars that gave their enemies' systems life, and their planets being frozen in the void or utterly annihilated in a seething storm of stellar fire. This method of warfare was something that was actually looked down upon by many of the other dynasties, as they didn't see anything honorable about simply exploding your enemy's sun and refusing to meet them in the field of battle. However, not all Necrons agreed. Some applauded Mefrit's deeds, as they saw them as the living avatars of Necron supremacy. Now, regardless of any individual dynasty's personal opinions on them, none could argue with the results, as countless interstellar campaigns were swiftly and decisively concluded as soon as the Mefrit got involved. They didn't seem to care what other Necrons thought of them, as from their perspective, to be feared was equal to or even superior than being respected and honored. When we pick back up with them in the 42nd millennium, like with many other dynasties, their power is only a fraction of what it once was, as most of their tomb worlds had been destroyed by the time they woke back up, and their Pharaon had been killed by Eldari infiltrators. But by far the greatest loss that the dynasty suffered was that the system-killing superweapons that they had originally employed had all but been completely destroyed, having fallen victim to the passage of time or picked apart piece by piece by raiders that didn't know what they were. The dynasty is currently leaderless, and thus many ambitious nobles have thrown their hat in the ring in an attempt to gain control and become the new Pharaon. No matter how many wars each of these individual nobles win, or whatever acts of grandeur they may bring to fruition, the reality is that the first to be able to reclaim the ability to murder stars outright will surely reign supreme, and thus unify the dynasties under their banners. This has led many of these hopeful rulers to throw all of their resources behind the employment of ever more cryptechs and the techno-mandrites for aid. Technological superiority can come in a lot of different forms, and it doesn't just have to be a giant doomsday cannon. The sun-worshipping Necrons of the Nefric dynasty have equipped their legions with a particularly interesting and useful device that makes them stand apart from all the rest. The crown world of the Nefric dynasty is particularly interesting in that it provides an overwhelming bounty of solar energy due to its 3 separate stars. Such a bountiful region ended up drawing the attention of imperial settlers who came to inhabit the planet while the dynasty slept. These settlers, however, would end up finding themselves in the direct path of another Necron dynasty known as the Altmore, who sought to harness the unlimited power of the suns for themselves. When the Nefric finally woke up, they were greatly offended by seeing both of these factions fighting over their stars, and the Pharaon of this dynasty had actually had his engrams corrupted during his sleep. He didn't just appreciate these stars, but had become completely obsessed with them. He viewed these interlopers as desecrating their sacred rites. He wasted no time in launching a campaign of lightning-swift and ferocious retribution that wiped out the remaining Imperial forces and drove off the rival Necrons.
Many years have passed since the dynasty's awakening, and in that time, they have long harnessed the Triple Sun's energy to great effect, amassing huge arsenals of doomsday weaponry and other potent technologies with which to render all those that stand before them to nothing more than ash. Not only this, but their Pharaon had become so insanely obsessed with the importance of these 3 stars that he apparently wanted not just to harness their energy, but to become like them as well. He viewed himself as a celestial deity, and thus to be closer to the stars he worshipped, he instructed his cryptex to create for him a skin of living metal that through advanced hyperchemical processes allowed him to basically transform into a being of pure light. This allowed the Pharaon to cross incredible distances in the blink of an eye. This metagold skin proved to be so unbelievably effective that through the Pharaon's great benevolence, he would end up bestowing this technology to his most trusted overlords and lieutenants, as well as eventually working it into the bodies of his lesser soldiers as well. Now the legions of the Nephra crusade across the galaxy, advancing on distant battlefields in gilded magnificence, stuttering and blinking out of existence. They advance quickly and without warning, and nothing can get between them and their objective, as they simply phase through any obstacle they encounter. Although we've just covered the 6 main dynasties that come to make up the majority of the forces of the Necrons, there are dozens if not hundreds of lesser-known dynasties that currently exist in the grimdark future as well. One such dynasty is the Oriskar dynasty, whose primary purpose is to guard the celestial orrery, which is considered to be one of the most powerful weapons and useful scrying devices that exists in the physical universe. It is a giant holographic map of the entire galaxy that updates in real time and has the remarkable and unexplainable ability to cause any of the stars represented within its holographic matrix to spontaneously supernova if the user initiates the correct protocol. It would be utterly disastrous if such a device fell into the wrong hands. Be those hands human, Eldari, or Chaos, or even those of other Necrons. That's why the Oriskar dynasty remains mostly neutral in the Necrons' political squabbling. It's chosen to exist solely as the orrery's protectors, utilizing it only for scrying purposes and to trim certain undesirable elements from the galaxy. They understand that the consequences of using such a device can never really be fully quantified. And it's a common saying in the real world that if you were to go back in time and step on a butterfly, you could completely alter the course of history. Causing a sun to spontaneously supernova is like that on an incomprehensible scale. They have so much respect for this device that using it as a weapon is almost never done. There's another smaller dynasty known as the Thocht dynasty, whose core worlds exist in a region of space within Segmentum Pacificus, and this area is filled with radiation-emitting void rifts. Now, the cryptex of the dynasty have studied the rifts for multiple millennia and have learned how to harness this seemingly unlimited supply of radiation to further enhance the dynasty's weapons and soldiers, causing each and every one of them to shimmer with an unnatural glow. Their warriors on the battlefield emitting a deadly aura that causes their enemies to sicken and die, while they march forward completely immune to the radiation's devastating effects. And the final smaller dynasty that I want to talk about, in fairness, isn't exactly a dynasty, but I think it's super cool. It's known as the Bone Kingdom of Drazig, which exists in the haunted region of space known as the Ghoul Stars. It's infamously ruled over by a single insane overlord, whereas every other Necron on the world's surface is a flayed one. Predatory and deranged Necrons that prowl the planet's surface, hungering for flesh and fighting amongst each other for scraps of rotting meat. The planet's ruler is known as Vargol, or the Fallen Lord as the other Necrons like to refer to him. He rules over this charnel kingdom and seemingly remains untouched by the flare virus that has consumed his people. Nobody knows why he has chosen to stay here, as it's not uncommon for Necrons to join other dynasties, and no truly sane individual would choose to stay on a planet populated entirely by insane murder robots that cover themselves in the skin of their victims. But for some reason he does, and the flayed ones choose to listen to him, as he's able to provide them with the only thing they desire: fresh meat. Every few months, when their gory reserves begin to run low, Vargol announces a time of bounty and dispatches his fleets to raid nearby worlds, seeking not riches, plunder, or even conquest, as they do not wish to fully eradicate any of the damned inhabitants of the Ghoul Stars worlds. They seek only to take tithes of gore and congealing blood, leaving enough living chattel behind to repopulate, or more accurately, replenish his feeding grounds. There are tons of other lesser dynasties, and perhaps I'll make a follow-up video in the future where we dive into nothing to repopulate. Do you know of any super cool and obscure dynasties that you'd love to hear me talk about? What about all the ones we talked about today? Which one was your favorite and why? Personally, I play the Necrons in the 40k tabletop game, and I find myself using the Novak more than any other dynasty, as I'm a big fan of Flayed Ones and Necron Melee. But if I'm being honest with you,
main arc.
The Nihilic have got to be my favorite. Super rich Necrons in a gloriously gaudy paint scheme that have bigger and better equipment than everyone else it's just too perfect. I'm constantly looking for new ideas for videos, so if you know of a topic in Warhammer 40k that you'd love to hear me talk about, or one that you think more people need to know about, then let me know about it down in the comment section. If you're relatively new to 40k, take some time to read the...
Okay, so there we go. There is, well, every Necron faction explained, except he did forget the one that I mentioned from the start, the Maynarch dynasty. He didn't even mention Zun Bakir, the Mother of Oblivion, which, I don't know, kind of surprised by that. Is, unless that character's dead? And that could explain why, or maybe this this dynasty is just not around anymore. Capital unknown, colors are orange. The Maynarch dynasty is a Necron dynasty active in the Segmentum Tempestus. They embrace nihilism, hatred of life. However, the efforts of their overlord, most of all Zumbayark, that allowed the order to be restored to the dynasty, gave purpose, well-suited genocide, systematic extermination of life. After years of probing and studying, eventually Maynarch made first contact with the Imperium in the ongoing Orphene War? Orphene War. Orpheus Sector. Imperium, Necrons, and Forces of Chaos. Huh. Interesting. So, I guess this character is still around. This dynasty is still around too. I don't know why both videos left it out. Neither Wes Hammer or Templin Institute covered it, so that's very strange. That's very odd. Although it does kind of sound like that, you know, from reading that little bit right there and going to, which dynasty was it? The one that was all about the blood and stuff like that. Yeah, the Novak dynasty kind of sounds a little bit like it, but not so much, because that Maynarch dynasty is all about just exterminating all life, and this is just, you know, we see blood, we, you know, we rage more. So, yeah, I don't know. Something about that character and that dynasty that nobody wants to talk about, which is kind of strange. I don't know. I'm gonna have to find some other videos, see if I can learn more about it, because now I'm 0 for 2 on videos and no one's mentioned it. But yeah, overall that was you know, very cool. It does sound like maybe some sort of like civil war between the Silent King and the Stormlord could be coming. Some of these dynasties look pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, they look badass. The Novak dynasty and you know, them being all red and stuff like that just looks pretty badass. I do like the color scheme. I mean, that's pretty cool. And then of course the what was the other one? The purple. Yeah, I don't remember where. Oh, the Thok dynasty. Yeah, that one looks pretty cool. I do like the purple. The purple's pretty cool. But yeah, some of the dynasties are pretty cool. About it kind of sounds like there's like a lot of I don't want to say like spin-offs, but like you got the main faction, what was it, the Sautek dynasty, you know, like the biggest one, stuff like that. Kind of makes me think of the Ultramarines, you know, because they are the poster child of Space Marines, you know. They're the biggest, well, not the big, yeah, the biggest, but you know, they're good at everything type of thing. That's kind of what I get from those. was it the Novak dynasty, about the blood and stuff like that. Kind of reminds me of the Blood Angels and the Red Thirst a little bit. And then you had the... Which ones was it? Yeah, I think these guys here... Are these the ones that defend... Yeah, defend that hologram? No. Which one was it? Yeah, I think it was this one here. The Orskar? How does he say it?
Covered the 6 main dynasties that come to make up the majority of the forces of the Necrons. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of lesser-known dynasties that currently exist in the grimdark future as well.
Orskar?
One such dynasty is the Orskar dynasty.
Orskar dynasty, yeah, well, they defend that weapon map thing. Kind of reminds me of the Harlequins defending the Black Library. So it kind of seems like there's, like, you know, vibes of everything else, like, you know, just kind of influenced some of the other races and stuff like that. I don't know, but that's just me. But yeah, so there we go. There is most Necron factions explained, since you clearly missed one of them. So yeah, but yeah, still really cool. Necrons are awesome. Their weaponry is so cool. It's pretty cool that they're still so technologically advanced, even going to sleep for that long and having all these other races, you know, out there and stuff like that, like Eldar and Tau and stuff like that, where you figure, well, they're newer, they haven't been sleeping, so they've been, you know, upgrading and stuff like that, so you figure their technology would, you know, progress further, while the Necrons are just sleeping for 60 million years, so they're not really working on anything. So that's still pretty impressive that, you know, they are pretty technologically superior to every other race still after all that time. So that is very cool. But yeah, I wish I got to play them. Well, it is what it is. I mean, I try to get some models here and there, but, you know, it is what it is. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. That'd be awesome. Remember, feel free to subscribe to my channel. Follow me on social media. Links in the description box below. Come join me over on Discord. We can talk more 40k. You can suggest videos for me to watch. You can tell me about the models you're buying, building, painting, converting, things like that, because I'd always love to see pictures of, you know, painted, converted models and things like that. That'd be very cool. And yeah, other than that, you know, hit the thumbs up button. That'd be awesome. Remember, feel free to subscribe to my channel. And other than that, yeah, just stick around. More videos are on the way. And I will see you guys next time.